Hey there, I'm Alex Kidman, and this is the Google Pixel 9 Pro. Let's get into the review. So the Pixel 9 Pro was the slightly odd duck this year because Google released it slightly later than the other Pixel 9 phones, presumably for factory production reasons. And it would be kind of easy to say, well, this is just a smaller Pixel 9 Pro XL. And you've already done a review of that, Alex. Send people to watch that. Tell them, hey, it's smaller and the job's done. I can go right now, right? Not so fast. Because while that's broadly true, the reality of using this phone has actually led me to the realization that actually, outside of the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, which is a very different kind of proposition, this is actually my favorite Pixel phone of the year. Let's get into why that is. So while it's part of Google's Pro lineup, visually the Pixel 9 Pro is much more similar to the cheaper Google Pixel 9. It's built around a 6.3-inch display, same as the Pixel 9, with a 1280 by 2856 pixel 120Hz capable display, but it's an LTPO display, which means it can shift from 1 to 120Hz. So if you're reading an ebook, for example, it'll scale down. If you're watching video or scrolling through a web page or playing a high-intensity Android game, you're more likely playing in that 120Hz territory. That the Pixel 9 can't do. So there's a better screen in play here, just the same size. While physically it might look like a Pixel 9 in terms of color schemes, it's much more in the Pro territory. And that means you've got a choice of porcelain, obsidian, hazel, or rose quartz. And it's the hazel model that Google sent my way. That's probably the model that I would choose, but obviously tastes can vary. Me being me, of course, I'm going to throw a case on this thing as soon as I physically can, and I'd advise you do the same. It does reduce the impact of that camera bar, which is now, as with the other Pixels, a camera pill a little if that bothers you in terms of balance or hand feel or whatever, but cases are just a good idea, period. Use them, people. Google's claim for the new generation of Pixels is that they're twice as durable as the older models, although that's mostly to do with internal framework rather than, doubling up the IP protection rating. This is still an IP68 phone, which means, yes, you can take it underwater and it should survive, although there are limitations to the way IP testing works. That's clean lab water, typically, not, for example, seawater. It should survive, but I really wouldn't push it too hard. Equally not pushing it too hard whilst it has Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on the front and back. I have not hit this thing with a hammer a whole bunch of times because, as I've explained in other videos, that kind of testing, unless you're doing it in a measurable way, is just kind of distraction porn. It's just, oh, look what happened to this one single phone. But I'm getting off the point here. Go watch that video. It explains it much, much better. So remember in the introduction when I said that the Pixel 9 Pro could be considered the 9 Pro XL, only smaller? Well, good, because that means you were paying attention. But critically within camera terms, yeah, it's totally true. So what you get here is exactly what you get with the 9 Pro XL, which is great to see because sometimes with these smaller Pro phones, you get slightly cut down camera specs, basically to make the bigger, more expensive Pro phone appear a bit more enticing to people who want better photos. Google hasn't done that here, and I applaud them for that. So what you get at the rear is a 50 megapixel wide sensor, 48 megapixel ultra wide, and a 48 megapixel 5x telephoto lens, while your selfie taking at the front is managed via a 42 megapixel front facing sensor. Now that sensor is also good enough for face unlocking, and this is not just your normal flat photo Android face unlocking. This is actually fully biometric to the extent that it will enable Google Pay if you let it. So it's their equivalent of Face ID. Google says it's secure enough for that now. Nice feature to have, works quite well. What all of this adds up to is a phone that shoots easily as well as the Pixel 9 Pro XL, and in some ways a little better. Now why am I saying better? It's basically because at that 6.3-inch size, it's a much easier phone to handle for shot composition and holding the camera steady. Big phones are harder to hold that way, smaller phones are easier, and that typically will lead you to getting better photos. Now, I guess if you've got truly gigantic hands at a Paul White kind of level, then okay, maybe that's moot. But if you've got more regular sized hands, then this works really well. I really do like having a compact, powerful camera phone, and that's exactly what the Pixel 9 Pro is. You also get access to Google's suite of AI enhancement features, and while I still do like the sharpening that Google's Zoom Enhance offers, The rest of the suite is a bit less thrilling. Take Reimagine, for example, which is meant to be the star of the show. This is meant to enable you to take a photo and reimagine it as something else and have a realistic-looking thing. So, say, for example, you had a photo of a duck, as one happens to, and you wanted to change it up a bit. That's a pretty decent-looking duck, for sure, as nature intended. But what if we reimagined it with scales? Can Reimagine do that? Well, it can have a try, but I'm not quite sure what the heck that is. It's not realistic looking in any way, and that's the biggest problem with Reimagine. It tends to create these very obviously AI-enhanced or AI-created photos, not more kind of subtle edits that might make someone think, yeah, this is a real shot. AI is obviously improving over time and may well get better in the future, but right now I would not buy this phone for the Reimagine feature. All of Google's Pixel 9 phones have the same processor under the hood. It's the Tensor G4. In the Pixel 9 Pro's case, that's matched up with 16GB of RAM and 128GB, 256GB, 512GB, or 1TB of fixed storage. Google wants you to have stuff in the cloud. It's never really allowed expanded storage via microSD, so this is not a surprise. Speaking of surprises, the Pixel 9 Pro's performance is not surprising at all because I've already tested a bunch of Tensor G4 phones. I know how they perform, and in absolute flagship terms, no, they're not quite the best. So here, for example, is how the Pixel 9 Pro compares against a bunch of other flagship phones and some other Pixel phones using Geekbench 6's CPU test. And before anyone complains, yes, I know, the Galaxy S24 FE isn't quite the comparable phone, ideally. That would, for now at least, be the Galaxy S24, but Samsung Australia were not interested in providing review units of those to, as far as I can tell, any Australian journalists, so the S24 FE is the closest example point I've got. Performance-wise, it's a mostly similar story in the GPU department as well, where the Pixels lie in a performance bracket below their Samsung and Apple's counterparts. If we look at 3D Mark, for example, that shows that very, very clearly. Now, technically, yes, the Pixel 9 Pro is besting its siblings here, but it's by such a small margin that it means essentially nothing in real-world performance terms. The reality here, of course, is that the Tensor G4 does handle most Android apps well enough, but if you're after performance power, it's not the processor you want, and that means the Pixels aren't the phones that you want. And that's a problem if you're looking more widely than just the Pixels. Because while the Pixel 9 Pro is cheaper than the Pro XL or the Pro Fold, with pricing here in Australia starting at $1,699, it's by no means a cheap phone. And critically, it's not as competitively priced as some prior Pixel generations have been. For years now, I've recommended Pixels, at least partly because you were getting near premium performance, that's still true, at a significant discount to premium prices. That's no longer true. And that's a problem, I think, because certainly if you are spending that kind of money, you should look for the best performance you can get. Tensor isn't quite there yet. Google's contention here is that concerns about performance are moot because the Pixel 9 series phone's secret sauce is AI and slatherings of it. And to prove this, the Pixel 9 Pro and the Pro XL and the Pro Fold, but not the regular Pixel 9, all come with a 1-year Gemini Advanced subscription, giving you access to Google's more advanced, more conversational cloud-based AI. And look, my general position on consumer-facing AI on devices hasn't really changed at all this year, because while it is an evolving field, it has room to grow. Right now, I just tend to hit more snags of miscomprehension or weird results than I do genuinely useful content, and that means I can't really trust the content that I'm getting out of it. And it's certainly nothing that I'd pay money for. The best part, in my view, of that Gemini Advanced subscription is you get 2 terabytes of Google Drive storage free for a year. Now that's worth something to me. The other big catch here, if you are in fact besotted with all things Gemini Advanced, is that once that 12-month period is up, you have to pay for access, priced currently here in Australia at $32.99. And that's per month, not per year. So if you use Gemini Advanced for the full 6 years of Android updates that the Pixel 9 Pro will get past that first free year, you'd end up paying an additional $2,375.28, or more than the cost of any given model of the Pixel 9 Pro, again, to utilize those features. And I'm not sure I see the value there myself. I'm not sure that that's something consumers really want to pay. You also get access to things like Google's Pixel Studio AI image creation app. But again, I'm more struck by the limitations and the implications of this technology than by its immediate wow factor. And I've got to admit, obviously, I have a bias here as someone who makes their living writing and creating content. I'm not generally in favour of AI-produced content. I am generally in favour of human-produced content because you can be sure, or you can be reasonably sure, that a human has actually checked it, that it's verifiable, that it's reasonably done, and that it's not just mass copying the work of others, which is, let's face it, what these generative AI models is built on. But maybe you're not so fussed about that. Maybe you don't care. You just want the nice images. Well, you can do that with some limitations. I mean, at the time of recording, for example, humans. You can't do humans. Google won't do humans. It's putting the final touches on human images. That sounds a bit creepy and wrong, but that's what they've said. But you can do other things. So while it won't do people, it doesn't really seem to care about copyrighted characters. So, for example, my tastes being what they are, I could send Godzilla merrily on a little holiday/rampage. Here he is in Hawaii. And with the same prompt, I can actually have him in different art styles. I can mix up the prompt just a little bit and put him into Paris, although for some reason, Pixel Studio seems to think that the French built the Eiffel Tower 3 times. I'm very, very certain that's not right. How about if I put him on home soil here in Australia? Well, yeah, okay. The Harbour Bridge is fine and the boardies are interesting, but Godzilla does not walk on water. He just doesn't. On the battery front, the Pixel 9 Pro has a 4,700 mAh battery, touch lower than the Android standard these days of 5,000 mAh, although, as I always note, it's not the size that counts, it's how economically a given combination of processor, screen and app usage chews through the power available. And here I turn to my standard YouTube 1-hour battery test at first, pitting it against the same crop of smartphone contenders. Here's how it fared. Now that result slightly surprised me, if only because the Pixel 9 shares the same battery size and doesn't have the advantage of a full LTPO 1 to 120Hz display to help it conserve battery. Though again, with video playing, the odds of it falling to 1Hz are quite low. 96% remaining isn't a bad score to speak of, however, and it should point to an easy all-day battery life for most users by itself. Where battery matters got really interesting was when I threw it through my extended 3-hour YouTube battery test. I've only recently started using that expanded test, but here I have been able to throw it against many of the same phones, and here the Pixel 9 Pro did a lot better. Now the Pixel 9 is still the better overall battery performer, for sure, but the Pixel 9 Pro's 3-hour figure puts it ahead of the larger Pixel 9 Pro XL, which is really pleasing to see. Rather predictably, you don't get a charger in the box with the Pixel 9 Pro, though it does support 45-watt USB-C charging or Qi charging up to 21 watts. So should you buy the Pixel 9 Pro? Well look, I have to say up front, Google's Pixel lines exist in their own particular Android niche. They're not quite powerful enough to be the absolute flagship standards, and sadly, they're not quite so competitively priced as they used to be to make them an absolute slam dunk recommendation for everyone either. However, if I was picking a non-folding Pixel phone to buy this year, it absolutely would be the Pixel 9 Pro. You're not getting the larger display of the Pixel 9 Pro XL, but you are getting better longer-term battery life, you're getting the same excellent camera array, and the same year's worth of 2TB Google Drive storage that also has Gemini Advanced attached to it. I suspect Google sees that latter point the other way around, but why quibble? The regular Google Pixel 9, of course, is still a fine phone, but once you take out the cost of that Gemini Advanced subscription, it's free for a year only on the Pro phones, you're essentially in the same pricing territory for a phone with a better display and better cameras, and all of that adds up to making the Pixel 9 Pro the best of this year's Pixel 9 crop. Or in other words, no, it's not just a smaller Pixel 9 Pro XL after all. And that's my take on the Pixel 9 Pro. Got any thoughts? Hit me up in the comments below. Thanks for watching all the way through to the end. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for liking and subscribing. And please consider becoming a patron, donating via Ko-Fi or PayPal. I'll leave links in the description below because all of that really does help me to make more videos more quickly, cover more topics, take more viewer suggestions. It's a really great thing to do if you're able to do. Thanks a lot.